Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, there is excitement amongst East African football fans as the 2027 African Cup of Nations is scheduled to be hosted by a trio of countries from the region: Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. Meanwhile, 2025 favourite Morocco is also backed by votes from the Confederation of African Football. Also, France's ambassador to Niger finally returns home after having defiantly hung on in the junta-led country, despite having been expelled back in August. And in death, as in life, the love of family members endures in Madagascar in the most tangible of ways. Every few years, the turning of the bone ceremony sees the remains of those who have been lost exhumed, tended to, and even introduced to the newest members of the community. But first, Morocco will stage the 2025 edition of the Africa Cup of Nations before the tournament heads out to East Africa in 2027, when for the first time it will be staged by three countries: Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda. Leaders from the regions have been celebrating the successful bid. Edward Cousins is in Cairo, where the Executive Committee of the Confederation of African Football made their announcement on Wednesday.
Morocco will host the Africa Cup of Nations in 2025, replacing Guinea. That was expected, as the Moroccan bid was the only remaining one after rival bids withdrew. Morocco showed a strong desire to host this tournament, and Moroccan football is on the rise. In the World Cup in 2022, they reached the semi-finals, and they put African football on the map. For Morocco, hosting the Africa Cup is a step towards something even bigger. They plan to submit a joint bid for the World Cup in 2030 together with Spain and Portugal.
The facilities, the infrastructure, the commitment of Morocco to football in Morocco and in Africa, but also the enthusiastic support of the government and the good leadership that Fauzi is providing. But as I said early on, the support of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, may God assist him, has also been very important.
In 2027, the Africa Cup will be hosted by three countries: Uganda, Tanzania and Kenya. And this was a surprise. Their bid beat rival bids by major football countries in Africa, such as Egypt and Senegal. It is the first time for the Africa Cup to be co-hosted by three countries, and also the first time for these three countries to host the tournament. The president of the CAF praised the presidents of Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda for their strong drive and commitment to bring the Africa Cup to East Africa.
Edouard Cousin there for us. Now, after weeks of diplomatic tensions, the French ambassador to Niger has finally arrived back in Paris. Last month, Sylvain Ité had been ordered to leave and given a 48-hour ultimatum by the military junta after its coup in the country in July. Nevertheless, Ité stayed on until French President Emmanuel Macron announced plans for his departure on Sunday. Caris Garland brings us more.
Forcé et poussé.
More than a month after the military junta ordered his expulsion, the French ambassador to Niger, Sylvain Ité, along with 6 colleagues, finally left the country, arriving in Paris on Wednesday. Members of the Nigerian army overthrew President Mohamed Bazoum at the end of July, bringing relations with France to an all-time low. The junta withdrew Ité's diplomatic immunity and visa 1 month later, but Paris initially refused to recognize the orders, saying only Bazoum's deposed government could order the envoy out. On Sunday, Emmanuel Macron told French media the ambassador would leave within hours, and 1,500 French troops would withdraw from Niger by the end of the year. And it's an announcement welcomed on the streets of Niamey.
The French military must leave immediately because we really don't need them. We don't need them. They've been saying they'd help us for decades, but we haven't seen any change. So we don't want their help.
All the French have to do is leave. That's enough, thank you. They can keep everything they have, but we have nothing to do with them anymore.
Niger isn't the only former French colony now turning on Paris. Over the last 2 years, coups in Mali and Burkina Faso have also pushed out French soldiers, while residents there have taken to the streets to protest France's involvement in the countries.
Over the last few years, Benin has suffered a rise in terror attacks. Now, it began in 2019 with the kidnapping of 2 French citizens and the murder of their guide in the Pendjari Animal Reserve. The following year saw a spike in violence across the country. Now, that prompted the 2022 launch of a large-scale anti-terror operation. Now, our team has followed some of its troops on patrols along the northern borders. They've sent us this report.
200 meters away is the border into Burkina Faso, an area controlled by various armed groups. The Beninese military have had to move into the area, ready to push back any potential invasion.
We have a lot of military units all over the place to cover our area of operation. This is how we keep the Pendjari National Park secure.
Gangs have been using WAP, West Africa's largest wildlife park complex, as a trade route. This area, larger than Belgium, is spread out across Benin, Burkina Faso, and Niger. It has been closed to civilians since the start of 2022. Fuel and livestock are transported through this route and later exchanged for weapons in Nigeria. In March of this year, a patrol team killed 7 jihadist fighters affiliated with the Islamic State, who were trying to set up a terrorist cell in W Park.
This is new because we thought it was the Al-Qaeda-linked JNIM group. The maps, Islamic militant flags, these signs show us that it's not just them, but also other related groups that want to set up shop to carry out their missions.
While soldiers search the parks for terrorists, rangers ensure that nearby communities still have access to its resources. Depriving locals of this land would create resentment, which terror groups would be quick to capitalize on.
If the park director's not there, I call the lieutenant. I tell him I need such and such a thing. He tells me to wait. After 3 days, he calls me to tell me to come.
Winning hearts and minds is key in curbing the influence of groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. Locals are encouraged to report any suspicious behavior. The village of Kurukualu is claimed by both Benin and Burkina Faso. Up until recently, it was under jihadist control, serving as a logistics and supply base. It has now become a symbol of Benin's fight against terrorism.
And finally, the Malagasy funerary tradition, known as the turning of the bones, sees families reunited across the boundaries of life and death. The remains of late loved ones are carefully exhumed and tended to every few years. Called Famadahana, the custom is based on the belief that the spirits of the dead only join the ancestors once the body is completely decomposed, and until then, still deserve the attention and care of those that they've left behind. Gail Borgia reports.
In the rural highlands of Madagascar, processions like this one are not unusual. A portrait of Boudou, a woman who died 7 years ago, is carried at the front. Today, her family are exhuming her corpse in a funerary tradition known as the turning of the bones. This ancestral rite originated in Asia and also involves communing with the dead through music. Lawrence and her family had to save 1,500 euros over the year to pay for all of this, and at last the moment has come. Lawrence will finally see her mother again and even introduce her daughter.
Grandma is there. Don't cry anymore. We will get close to her afterwards. First, they need to cover her in a shroud.
Malagasy people often use this ceremony to ask for help from the dead. They believe that their ancestors are sacred and have the power to improve their lives.
Today, I asked my mother to bless our family. I was very sad when she died, but this was a fleeting emotion. My sadness disappeared quickly.
Ceremonies like these help to ease the pain of grieving. The turning of the bones is also a way of signifying wealth and success, with copious amounts of food and alcohol served to the entire community. Today, Fantasena is reunited with the grandmother that raised him. He, like others, made the most of the occasion to have physical contact with a family member he loved dearly.
It's a very special moment to be able to shroud and touch her body. Everything she passed down to me is coming back into memory, like her life lessons and all she taught us.
As the ceremony draws to a close, Boodoo's family are reluctant to let her go. They hope that her spirit will continue to influence their lives until they meet again.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, but do so again if you can. Till then, take care.
These inspections are frequent at the US-Mexican border. 50 times more powerful than heroin, fentanyl is the most dangerous opioid ever.
Like 3 times a day. I would smoke more, but I've heard of people overdosing the first time they ever do it.
Easy to make and easy to transport, fentanyl is a financial jackpot for Mexican cartels and a nightmare for US authorities.
Que se expandió como una pandemia. O sea, empezó a haber gente muerta por eso. Se produce que millones de pastillas diarias, millones de pastillas diarias. Y es algo que es imposible detenerlo.
Reporters on France 24 and France24.com. On France24.com, click live. Find the stories you want to watch or to read about. Live news 24 hours a day in 4 languages. Explore the topics that captivate you. Are you looking for the latest news or to watch a show on demand? Follow us. Live international news is just a click away. Liberté, égalité, actualité.